Hello and welcome to Insight. I'm Antoine Lindley. The Kingdom of Aksum was one of the largest empires in Africa. From minting their own currency to trading with Rome, it was an empire considered elite and a first class. But how much do we know about this ancient civilization and the rise and fall of this mighty empire? Insight is brought to you by our proud partners. Coca-Cola, open happiness. St. George Beer, the first Ethiopian beer since 1922. The city of Aksum, nestled in the high mountains of Ethiopia's Tigray regional state. From ancient ruins to the birthplace of Ethiopia's Christianity, it's a city that holds a unique place in the history of ancient civilizations and was once the center for one of the largest and most powerful empires in Africa, the Axumite Kingdom.
When we speak about the rise of the Axumite Empire or Axumite civilization, it becomes necessary to start with the other civilizations that Ethiopia had experienced before. Though the distance is very close, which may be about 50 kilometers northeast of Aksum, there was the Yeha civilization. The writing was started there, construction of palaces was started at Yeha, temples or religious centers were started at Yeha, small-scale industry was started at Yeha. This clearly shows that Yeha was a small urbanized urban center. Therefore, after the decline, probably after the decline of Yeha, it seems that Aksum had taken place to succeed Yeha.
By around the 400s BC, we see a distinct culture which is very much an Ethiopian culture. From that, we start seeing city-states develop. The city-states of Yeha, Adwa, Shire, what we now refer to these as modern cities, and Aksum begin to vie for power and control over the trade routes.
Aksumites were very aggressive, I can say, in their expansion. They were expansionists. And they were able to leave us different inscriptions. Unlike that of Yeha, which was totally dependent on one language, that is Sabian. The Aksumites added local language, Ge'ez, which later on developed and was used as a church language. And another one, the Greek language, because Greek at that time was, I can say, language of commerce.
The Axumite Empire dominated the trade route of the Red Sea. They even minted their own currency to facilitate trade.
They had highly refined coins with the bustos of the emperors, legends written under them, as if they were made by machines, you see. That was the skill of the Axumite smiths.
The silver coinage most likely was used internally for trade. Why? Simply because we see a lot more gez in the inscriptions of the coins. We find a lot more of the coinage here itself, and it seems to have been an easier way to trade internally using those two other metals than gold. Gold, again, I mean, when you're dealing with an elite people, you're not really trading at the minuscule level of a couple of coins.
In Aksum, the Aksumites were producing precious trading items like gold, ivory, hides of wild animals, including slaves. Therefore, this made it very important for the Egyptians and others. So it is because of this that it developed very well. What they imported was linen clothes for the upper class, cotton clothes for the lower class. Sometimes even golden plates were imported to the Horn of to Ethiopia.
We find, for instance, imported pottery. So to bring pottery from somewhere as far away as North Africa, for instance, or as far away as Persia, or even Central Asia, indicates that there was not only a taste for very exotic and luxurious items, but also an ability to pay for them.
It's also assumed that the Aksumites were trading with China, because there are evidences for this one. As far as the trade with the Middle East is concerned, Ethiopian coins were found there, India, Saudi Arabia, and in the Mediterranean world. That is clear indication that the currency that the Aksumites produced was used outside of Ethiopia.
The long distance trade that Aksum was engaged in has endowed the kingdom with the necessary economic background for the kings to emerge as prominent leaders, not only politically but also economically.
In the height of the Aksumite Empire, end of the 3rd, beginning of 4th into the 5th centuries AD, Aksum would actually be almost exclusively an elite city. As you would approach, you would see monuments on a grand scale, including the stele, some of the funerary monuments along the roads. We would see inscriptions, we would see statuary. But once you got inside, you would be totally encompassed by what we would classify as elite structures. Once we get into the middle of the 4th century, we see a large influence of Byzantine Christianity coming in. And at that point, King Ezana, that is probably the most well-known of our kings, is directly influenced by Christianity in that his tutor is a Christian slave from the Eastern Mediterranean. Later on, once King Ezana becomes king, this young man, Frumentius, goes back to Alexandria and is commissioned to come back as the bishop to begin Christianity, or the foundations of Christianity in the Axumite Empire.
Ezana, the king, in his earlier time, he wrote us inscriptions with pagan names of gods. The deities were considered as Ares, Maharam, Midir, whatever, a lot of them, see, because this clearly shows that he was not a Christian. But later, in his later period of reign, he left us several inscriptions which were clearly Christian inscriptions, because they mentioned God the Father, God the Son, the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, and what have you. And he claimed to have been the Son of God. This clearly indicates that he was converted to Christianity.
በአብርሃና አጽብሃ ዘመነ መንግስት የነበረው የክርስትና እምነት ያው አዲስ ክርስትና ስለሆነ አዲስ ነበረ ነገሩ። የሆነ ሆኖ ግን በጣም ጠንካራ ነበረ። በጣም ጠንካራ የሆነ የክርስትና እምነት ነበረ። ከዛ በኋላ ግን በይበልጥ ተስፋፋ እንጂ ዛን ጊዜም ቢሆን በመጀመሪያ ጊዜ ቢሆንም ጥሩ እንቅስቃሴ ጥሩ ብርታት ነበረው ክርስትና በአክሱም።
One of the most influential kings at the time is a king named Caleb. Caleb had gained not only the confidence but also the attention of the emperor of Byzantium at the time, a man named Justinian I, and he sent down an ambassador to create a pact between the two kingdoms. So this ambassador named Julian gives us a report actually of Caleb being presented. So here comes Caleb. He's actually being drawn on a chariot drawn by 4 elephants, and the chariot itself is actually gilt in gold. There's a description of the king's cloak or lower garment being made of gold and cloth, and the top vestment was actually a half shirt made of embroidered pearls.
At its height, the Axumite Empire began to lose control in trade and power.
Aksum had international relations as far as trade is concerned. It was okay or good until the 7th century. But after the rise of Islam, problems emanated or developed.
The rise of Islam has disconnected or insulated Aksum from her previous relationship with countries along the Eastern Mediterranean. This has again economically affected the power of Aksum.
So we have a religious shift, we have an economic shift, and we have an ecological shift. So the influences of all three of those factors lead to a very precipitous decline of the Axumite Empire. And at that point, there seems to have been a threshold which is crossed.
When they became a bit weaker economically, they became also politically or militarily weak. And they could not resist any attack from any direction. According to some, it is assumed that several ethnic groups are said to have revolted against them. As usual, they were doing this before, but the Aksumites had no power to subjugate them. This made Aksum absolutely weak, and they are said to have been unable to control, even to defend their city. As a result of this, they retreated to the central highlands, which was mountainous and a bit better for protection. This was how Aksum declined.
In today's modern Aksum, not far beneath the rubble lays Aksum's past glories. 98% of this ancient city still remains to be excavated. Established in 2006, Aksum University, Ethiopia's top university in heritage and archaeology, is leading the way in new discoveries and studies about this ancient civilization of Aksum.
There are so many archaeological sites in Aksum and its surroundings which are not assessed, which are not discovered yet, which are not put into use so far. So it is with this intention that Aksum University opened the program of archaeology.
Their Department of Archaeology and Heritage Management is a school of excellence. It is designed primarily to train local and indigenous leadership, not only in terms of archaeological theory, but also in terms of practice.
Together with the students, and the local instructors, and the international experts in archaeology, Aksum University is doing something very important to the nation.
To know more about this ancient city, I travel with Professor Walker through the historical sites of this once powerful kingdom.
Often this is referred to as the Queen of Sheba's palace. That's actually a modern tradition. The traditional name for it is Dungur. Dungur means construction made of small stones. This would be the monumental entrance. There would be a side entrance where others of the household would come in. But for receiving dignitaries, for giving an impression of power or status, this would be the entrance that people would use. This would be one of the side entrances into either the open courtyard, and then we would have residential area on this side. What we have here is a relatively recently excavated or discovered inscription from the King Ezana. King Ezana was the king who first introduced or was introduced to Christianity. This inscription specifically relates to the conquests that he has made in terms of people who tried to get out from under his dominance. So he lists in Sabaean script, in Ge'ez script, and then on the other side is a Greek script, all of the things that he was able to accomplish. So here we have the Azana inscription. The inscription talks specifically about the thanksgiving to God and to Jesus as Christ. So we've seen that transition has already taken place in terms of his adoption of Christianity from the previous inscriptions where he refers to the god of Mars and other Greek deities. What we're looking at here is referred to as the tomb of Bazan. Bazan was one of the earliest kings that we actually have a name for. Again, our shafts on either side, and then with our final descent into the actual chamber where the tombs of the patriarchs and others would have been laid. So in all, it's a large family tomb, probably used over several decades, if not a century. And these probably were for the higher officials or the patriarchs of the family. What we have here is the funerary complex known as the tomb of Caleb, one of the ancient Axumite kings, and the tomb of Gabra Meskel, his son. This is the entrance to the tomb of Caleb. So we'll walk down. There's actually 3 chambers down there. The middle chamber has a sarcophagus, or it had a sarcophagus, and the other 2 chambers are probably for just grave goods. So. This large stone here probably weighs 15 to 20 tons. It was formerly probably one of the larger cornerstones of one of our palace structures. Again, you can see the masonry joints, very elaborate, but using the existing stones to make sure that everything fit together. The roof are single large monoliths, single stones, 1, 2, 3, 4. They continue out as far as cover plates into the other chambers as well. We can try to get in through one of the chambers over here. The tomb of Gabra Meskel, the son of Caleb, actually is a little bit larger. This is a very exciting tomb on multiple levels, but the graffiti is actually one of the best aspects of it. So when we go down, we'll see, we'll point those out. The central chamber holds what we classify as a sarcophagus. Literally in the Greek it means sarko, flesh, phagus means to eat. So they would put the body in there, and as it would decompose, they would have a container on top, and that was the main way of taking the flesh off the bones. There are 3 represented here. This one actually has a cross. So again, in terms of the king Gabra Meskel and the Christian Axumite Kingdom, it would be very typical to find that. In our southern chamber, we have some very interesting elements. We have a cross up top. The very back, we also have another cross. We have masonry marks on each side. And what's most unique is we have a depiction of an elephant. So we have 4 legs, 1, 2, 3, 4. The trunk that comes down, the head with the ear, and the back tail. So we have here contemporaneous evidence that they knew of elephants, so the literature and this evidence seems to corroborate itself. Some of the inscriptions and carvings may be related to that period.
Another part of Aksum's past and elite glories are their huge granite obelisk, stretching long like modern skyscrapers. They were funeral monuments built for Aksum's ancient rulers, who may have been buried in the tombs beneath them.
So we're entering into the mausoleum. The mausoleum has been known for a long time. It's been identified, but it hasn't actually been fully excavated yet. Immediately above us and to the left is the large fallen stele. This is actually a single stone entrance designed to look like the Axumite regular wooden door. And you can see from the top that it's been fractured. That probably was from the original falling of the large stele. But we'll go in, there'll be chambers off to the sides in both directions, and there'll also be brick arches in the very end as well.
To understand the process of making and transporting these huge monuments, we hiked up Kubedra Mountain to a rock quarry where the steles were said to have been carved from. During our hike, we came across the lioness of Kubedra, a pre-Axumite rock carving representing a crouching lioness. The reason for this carving is not known. This is Kubedra Mountain, where the stones were removed and pulled into Aksum city by elephants, where they were chiseled and detailed for funerary markings. Before ending our journey, we heard of a newly discovered necropolis. The tomb has not been open to the public, and we were the first to get access for filming.
Okay. Let's do this corner. Over here. This one is formed in the shape of a cross. So as such, it probably is from a Christian family, probably directly associated with the tomb complex of King Caleb and Geber Mescal. Nope. We're actually in the southern chamber, and you can see it's built directly in the bedrock. They've carved it out. We have wash-in from the main entrance or the main shaft. We also have some wall collapse or some ceiling collapse. Underneath that, we actually have what looks to be a sealed cultural context. There's a different sound, different feel, different texture, different color of the soil.
Now, when you say cultural context, what do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean is that the original tomb floor would be part of that. So this will include things like the skeletal remains, pottery, possibly jewelry, other kinds of things. So anything that is not naturally deposited, something that is artificially deposited through usually a burial process, would contain cultural material. So that's what we refer to. What we actually have discovered are two pieces of ceramics just on the surface in identification or clearing to identify that cultural context, and the skeletal remains of children. So these tombs are very important for us because they help us to identify the possible cultural, religious, maybe even ethnic makeup of the ancient Axumite period. If you can imagine, they've come down as a shaft, dug out the natural stone, and then rebuilt it. So just notice the masonry on either side.
There are so many untold stories. For example, the bodies of the family that was buried here. Who were they? Were they noblemen or members of the royal family? They also say it's the first time for everything, and this is my first time to be inside a tomb or a grave. And for the professor, it's very easy for him to make his way out. I don't know if it'll be so easy for me, but we'll see what happens. Whew, Professor Walker, you are a true Indiana Jones. For you to exit out of this tomb so easily, for me, I had to struggle. It felt like for 2 days. But I want to thank you for your dedication, your commitment, as well as Aksum University's support for this trip and our experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. This concludes our program. I'm Antoine Lindley, and from all of us from Insight, thanks for watching.